again welcome with your applause our two candidates for U.S. Senate. Good evening. I'm Austin Jenkins from Public Radio's Northwest News Network and host of Inside Olympia on TVW. Welcome to the Kodiak Auditorium on the East Campus of Microsoft headquarters in Redmond, Washington. Tonight is the final debate between Democrat Patty Murray and Republican Chris Vance for U.S. Senate. Our debate tonight was organized by the Washington State Debate Coalition, founded by Seattle City Club this year to increase access to nonpartisan debates. We encourage you to participate tonight on Twitter with the hashtag WAELEX. That's hashtag WAELEX. Tonight's debate is made possible by the financial support of lead sponsors AARP Washington State and Microsoft, supporting sponsors the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Henry M. Jackson Foundation, and debate sponsor PEMCO Insurance. We also want to thank Microsoft for lending its support to host this event. Now, let's begin with our opening statements. We had a coin toss prior to the debate and determined that Senator Murray will go first. Your opening statement.
Well, thank you, Austin, and thank you to the Debate Coalition for putting this together and Microsoft for hosting us tonight. Thank you to all of you who are here tonight and listening in, and Chris, great to join you again as well. Like many, I am often frustrated by the gridlock and dysfunction of Washington, D.C., but here is how I get things done. I start with my Washington State ethics that were instilled in me at a very young age. You work hard, you do not complain, and you persevere till you get it done. And I come home every weekend and talk to people from communities around the state and hear their stories and their hopes and their dreams, and I take those back with me to Washington, D.C. every Monday morning to try and solve the problems that people face here. Here's a good example. A few years ago, I was hearing from so many parents and teachers and students that the federal education law, No Child Left Behind, wasn't working for anyone. I talked to one parent, Duncan Taylor, who told me that his son, who goes to Highline schools, had a good teacher, did well, but he got one of those letters home that said his school was failing. And Duncan said that he knew that the education his son was getting wasn't a failure. And worse, he felt that the loss of federal education dollars meant that many of the students who needed it the most would really lose out. So I took Duncan's story and that of many parents and students back with me to Washington, D.C. I found a Republican to work with. We wrote a plan, and we worked through that gridlock and dysfunction to pass a law that now means that it will work better here for Washington State families and parents and teachers. I hear people across our state talk to me about how the economy isn't yet working well enough for them. They're worried about college affordability or paying back their student loan. They talk to me about the crisis in their neighborhoods from gun violence, and they want us to get something done there. They tell me that they want to make sure that Medicare and Social Security is there for them. I take that Washington State work ethic, I listen to their stories, and I take them back to make sure that the policies that we pass and the investments we make work for the people I represent. So that's why I ask for your vote, so I can continue to be your voice and fight for you in the United States Senate. And finally, let me say this. I am tired of the hateful, divisive rhetoric that we are hearing at the federal level. I think it's time for leaders in our communities to stand up and say, enough. So again, Chris, tonight I hope that we can listen to each other, be respectful, share our ideas, and have a good discussion, and begin with our example to help lead our country to a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Vance, your opening statement.
Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Microsoft. Thank you to the Washington State Debate Coalition for making all these debates possible. And yes, absolutely, Senator, I'm looking forward to another thoughtful adult discussion. You and I got great rave reviews for our last debate, so we'll do it again. So I've been lucky enough to live in our beautiful state my entire life. I went to elementary school not far from here. My wife Ann and I met in college at Western Washington University. We've been married 28 years. We live in Auburn. We've been blessed with two great kids. Ann and our son Adam are here tonight, along with about half our family. Our daughter Natalie is in Pullman, and she should be studying right now. Natalie, you need to be studying. I've been proud to represent our community in the Washington State House of Representatives in Olympia as a member of the King County Council and as the statewide leader of my party. Now I'm running for the United States Senate because perhaps like you, I am fed up with Washington, D.C. And there was a moment in our last debate that I think sums up everything that's wrong with Washington, D.C. Senator Murray said she'd be willing to work with anyone to bring down our debt and save Social Security and Medicare, but then went on to rule out any options other than raising taxes and blamed the whole mess on the Republicans and George W. Bush. Folks, we're never going to get an agreement that way. Compromise happens when politicians have the guts to set aside their partisan talking points and come to the center. And in Washington, D.C., that never happens right now on the biggest issues that matter the most. America faces real challenges that demand real solutions. Our economy is stagnant. Our national security is threatened daily. Social Security and Medicare are going broke. We're $20 trillion in debt. The bottom line is Washington, D.C. is broken. And after 24 years in the Senate, Patty Murray is part of the problem. I think after this election, we need new independent voices in the Senate, people who will work to bring Republicans and Democrats together to solve the biggest problems, rather than just be rubber stamps to whoever the president is or to their party's leadership. Folks, this election is about a lot of things, but it really comes down to just one thing. It is time for a big change, and that's what I look forward to talking to you about tonight.
Thank you. Before we begin our formal questioning, there is a way for all of you here at Microsoft and those watching or listening on our many platforms can participate in shaping tonight's debate. This is in thanks to our friends at Microsoft Pulse. You will see on the screen that if you go to wadebates.org, that's wadebates.org, you can help decide the subject matter we will discuss later in the hour. You will be able to pick from 4 topics: healthcare, mental health, national politics, and paid parental leave. In a few minutes, we will check in on the results, and that will determine, again, some of the questions in this debate. This evening, I am joined by some of my colleagues in the news coverage field. Our first question tonight comes from Dave Ross of Cairo Radio in Seattle.
Thanks, Austin. The Debate Coalition has received hundreds of audience questions about immigration reform, especially as it affects people who are invited here on employment-based visas. Senator Murray, this is a question from Pradeep in Redmond. I've been in the USA for 10 years now on an H-1B visa. My application for a green card is still pending, and there is no hope of getting one in the near future. Every time I go out of the country to visit my family back home, I run the risk of getting stuck outside. I have to put my job, my house, my kids' education at risk to go on a vacation. What efforts are being taken to help legal immigrants awaiting employment-based green cards, and do you support the removal of the per-country limitation on H-1B visas?
Well, thank you so much, Dave, for that question on behalf of Habib. And I think it's safe to say that absolutely no one in our country thinks that our current immigration system is working today. We're at Microsoft this evening, and I know for them, they say it is not working for them. For our farms in the state of Washington, it isn't working for them. They can't have a secure workforce. And critically, it is not working for people like Habib, who live in the shadows and live in uncertainty. And it is imperative that we take up this issue at the federal level. I was very proud to be part of a bipartisan group of senators who passed strong immigration reform. It secured our borders. It provided a pathway for citizens. It fixed many of the rules that we face today and made sure that we brought some certainty. Unfortunately, it was stopped in the House and was not brought up for a vote, but I am determined to work to get this done. And one of the stories I have heard is from a young woman named Mari, who came here when she was 7 years old, grew up here, got good grades, worked hard, and she tells me that she now wants to start a business and get her business degree, but she's living in the shadows. What Mari said to me is she wants to be known. We should want Mari to be known, and we need to fix our immigration system so that can happen.
But again, the question was, would you essentially allow more people in under these visas?
The way this has to work is it has to be done in a balanced way under our immigration system so that we take all parts of what we are doing and make sure it's fair and balanced. Many people are concerned about the H-1B system that we have today that brings people in, mostly because they want to make sure that people here in the United States have access to jobs. We all do. We need that workforce to be educated and trained for the jobs that are here, but it can be done in conjunction with the H-1B program.
And Mr. Vance, same question for you, and do you support raising the per-country limitation on these visas?
Dave, the H-1B program we're here at Microsoft, where this has been utilized for a long time to get the workers who supposedly have special skills, high-tech skills that are necessary. I support that. But I have heard from a lot of tech workers and software workers here in Washington State that they think the H-1B program is being used to just simply bring in workers from overseas and then lower the salaries, and they're very concerned about that. I am pro-immigration reform. I think that the 2013 bill that the Senate passed had all the elements we need, and we do need a strong H-1B program, but there has to be a balance between protecting jobs of people who are already here. We've been talking a lot about immigration during this election, but just about everybody understands what has to happen. Yes, we need border security, absolutely. Then we need a guest worker program for the 11 to 12 million people who are already here. We need a better guest worker program both for high-tech and otherwise. But the problem is, once again, Congress failed to get this done. Immigration reform has been stalled in Congress for years. It's one of the best examples of the gridlock that's going on. I think we need more people, especially more Republicans, who are going to work across the aisle to make sure the next Congress actually passes comprehensive immigration reform. It's the right thing for our economy. It's the right thing for families all across this state.
So did I hear you correctly? You would not raise the number?
Dave, I'm pretty decisive about a lot of things. On this one, I need to study this. I've heard a lot of concerns that we're already allowing too many people in on H-1B. So this is one where I'm going to go into Congress with an open mind on exactly what the number needs to be per country for H-1B visas.
Thank you.
This is a question for both of you. On Friday, a wave of cyber attacks disrupted major websites, including Twitter, Netflix, and Amazon. We've been hearing a lot during this campaign cycle about hackers gaining access to the Clinton campaign and the DNC. What can and should the United States do to better safeguard our public and our private networks and systems? And how do we balance the need for cybersecurity with the right to privacy? Mr. Vance, I'll let you respond first.
Well, the right to privacy goes to, I think one of the main rights to privacy is to not have your system hacked. I don't understand this. I don't understand when I read headlines that foreign governments, particularly the Russians, are, according to our intelligence services, participating in this sort of activity, and we tolerate it. I mean, as I understand it, the United States Cyber Command is the world's best at cybersecurity and also cyber warfare. This is pretty simple to me. If other countries are going to purposefully launch cyber attacks against us, they need to understand that there'll be swift retaliation, and that countries cannot just be allowed to do these sorts of things that are practically a form of warfare. I just don't understand why we have the technology to strike back if necessary, and I'm not sure why we're not using it. And just about every country in the world wants to have good relations with the United States. We need to make it clear that if you're going to engage in cyber warfare against us, you're not going to have good relations with the United States.
Senator Murray.
Well, thank you very much. Having our information hacked by anyone is really disturbing. In this election cycle, we have heard about Russia and cyber attacks to try and influence our election. We cannot allow that to happen. How we deal with cyber attacks, whether it's our electric grid or our emails, we have to make sure that we are working to protect the privacy that we all enjoy, along with making sure that we have the information shared efficiently so that we can prevent them and make sure that we are doing everything we can to be prepared for whatever kind of cyber attack we have. That means that private industry, along with government, have to have strong policies. And we need to do one other thing which is critically important, and we're doing it here in the state of Washington, and that is training people in the area, making sure we have educators who are trained to have professionals who are trained with cyber education, because it is a very complex field. It is not easy. Anybody who tells you there is an easy answer to this hasn't seen all the information that we know. We have to work together with our businesses and with our government to do this in the right way. Again, that protects our individual privacy, but makes sure that we can share information and know those attacks. I know that my fishing license was hacked. Some people's health care was attacked. These kinds of attacks are very complex, and we need to work together to address them.
Okay, a follow-up to this. You'll each have 60 seconds to respond. Mr. Vance, when you talk about striking back, do you mean a declared war, an undeclared war? What are the rules of the road?
Well, again, there have been instances when countries have gone too far. I believe Iran went too far at one point. And the U.S. has an entire branch of its military called Cyber Command, which has the ability to engage in these same sort of activities that are being launched against us. We need to make it clear that if you're going to attack our computer grids, if you're going to attack our systems, you're going to face the same sort of response from us. And my understanding is we're better at it. And so we just cannot passively sit by and allow these countries to launch attacks against us with impunity. It just makes no sense to me.
Senator Murray.
Well, your question is do we launch a counter cyber attack?
Yeah. And do you declare it or not declare it? Is it done in a stealthy way?
First of all, we need to be very careful that we know that a cyber attack occurred and where it came from. And again, this is a very complex issue, and we have to be very smart and wise about our resources and what we may do in response. Yes, if we know that someone has launched a cyber attack against us and we are confident we have the right information as a nation, we need to stand up and have a strong response, and I am for that. But again, we have to be very careful in this arena, and that's why we need to make sure that we have the right investments in our nation within our budget to make sure that we are not cutting back on this critical infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Now to another one of our journalists, Melissa Santos of the Tacoma News-Tribune.
A question for Senator Murray. In May, the Obama administration directed schools across the nation to provide transgender students with access to suitable facilities, including bathrooms and locker rooms, that match their gender identity. Several states sued the Department of Education and won, temporarily allowing schools across the country to block trans students from the bathrooms of their choice until the courts decide whether doing so violates federal civil rights law. On Thursday, the Department of Education announced it would appeal that decision. What is your position on this issue, and do you believe that states should have the right to decide about transgender access to bathrooms or locker rooms? Senator.
Well, first of all, I'm going to say I'm very proud of my state that is very forward-leaning and a great example to people across the country that we respect individuals no matter who they are or where they come from, and we have said loudly no to the transgender bathroom issue. I support the Department of Education challenging that in the courts because I want to make sure that any young person in this country has the ability to know that they are secure in who they are and are not discriminated against. You know, we've come a long ways, but we have a long ways to go, and we need to use all of our resources to make sure that young people feel comfortable about who they are and they're not discriminated against. And let me just say one other thing. This is why it is so important that we have a Supreme Court that has a full court. These are decisions that they make that impact all of us. And the Republicans have filibustered, or have prevented a nominee from sitting on that court for the last 9 months. We need a full court because these kinds of decisions impact all of us and our families.
Mr. Vance, throughout the country, we are seeing conservative lawmakers trying to pass legislation that would ban transgender people from being able to access restrooms, changing rooms, and locker rooms consistent with their gender identity. Would you vote in favor of federal legislation supporting these bans?
No, and let's be clear about this. I want to enact policies that protect the rights and the safety and dignity of all Americans, including transgender individuals. In America, we believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And liberty means every American has the right to live their lives as they see fit, to live out their identity as they see it. And this is a new area, and I understand it makes people uncomfortable. But we need to enact policies that do respect everyone's rights and dignity and safety, and we can do that. And that is happening, of course, in Washington State, where I work for the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and we enacted policies in our schools several years ago. And they do respect the privacy and these situations for all students. What they did in North Carolina, for instance, where even people who had gone through the entire process and now were anatomically of one sex, they had to go back and use the bathroom that corresponded to their birth certificate. That's just wrong, and it's cruel, and we don't need to be doing that. And I agree with Senator Murray. This is an issue that is going to be decided in the courtroom as the Supreme Court interprets the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which says that all people have equal protection under the law. I agree with that. And I think that the Republican leadership was wrong to rule out consideration of any nominee that Mr. Obama would send them. But I think it was equally wrong when Senator Murray joined with other Democrats to filibuster Samuel Alito, who was a Republican nominee to the Supreme Court. Both parties have blocked Supreme Court nominations, and it's wrong. I won't.
This is a question for both of you. If you had the power, and I know you don't, but if you had the power to wave a magic wand over the federal budget and put any amount of money into one program, but you would have to take an equal amount out of another program, what would those two programs be? Mr. Vance.
Wow. Well, I know where I'd put more money. We need to roughly triple the amount of money we're spending on clean energy research, in my view. I think the federal government needs to do much more to develop technology to address the issue of climate change. That's how we're going to deal with the issue of climate change, not by raising taxes on the American people, as Senator Murray and others support, but by developing clean technologies. Yes, wind and solar and cleaner cars, but especially carbon capture and sequestration, which is a technology to use in power plants to virtually eliminate the amount of carbon being put into the atmosphere. That's where I'd want to put more money. Austin, in terms of taking from any one program, you know, one of the things that bothers me about the debate over the federal budget is people will look at small areas. You know, we're never going to solve this problem by buying a few fewer paper clips at the Department of Commerce. The only way we're going to bring down our debt is by doing the big things, by addressing entitlement reform and Social Security and Medicare. Those are the cost drivers in the federal government. So as I've said throughout this campaign, we need a Simpson-Bowles-style grand bargain to bring down our debt in that area, rather than having these small debates over funding over small areas, because with the debt of $20 trillion, moving around the edges isn't going to bring any of it down. And that's why I strongly support a bipartisan grand bargain, and so far Senator Murray hasn't, and I don't think it's going to get done with the current members of the United States Senate.
Senator Murray.
Well, thank you for the question, because I've always said that budgets are more than numbers on a page. They are what set the priorities and policies of our country. And the investments that I think are most important today are the ones that help grow our middle class, making sure that we have a strong education system, the issue of college affordability, the investing in our infrastructure, making sure that people have the capability to have a job that pays them more so we can grow our economy from the middle out. So I would absolutely invest in education and research and helping our middle class grow. And I would pay for that by closing corporate loopholes that benefit the wealthiest Americans and biggest corporations, because I believe that the trickle-down theory doesn't work, that if we help grow our economy by investing in middle-class Americans, that's how we can get a better budget that actually reflects the policies and priorities that are important for our country.
Okay. I suspected we might not hear a specific vote for a cut, but we're going to move on. Before we continue
Well,
to
I
our
consider
next...
corporate
Austin.
tax loophole a cut.
I've been very specific about where we need to make changes in the federal budget.
Before we continue to our next question, we want to check in on our Microsoft Pulse topics. You are picking from 4 topics, and we have some early votes in. Right now, national politics is leading with 34%, healthcare with 28%, surprise, surprise, right?
Yes.
Mental health with 22%, and parental leave with 16%. You can still vote. If you go to wadebates.org, that's wadebates.org, you can still vote on the subject matter that we will be discussing later in the debate. We now go to our next question, and joining us now is Pacific Lutheran University student Kate Hall. Kate.
A question for both of you, starting with Senator Murray. Hillary Clinton has proposed a plan that would allow every student from a family making $85,000 a year or less to go to an in-state 4-year public college or university without paying tuition. By 2021, Clinton says, families with incomes up to $125,000 a year will pay no tuition at these institutions. Her plan would require congressional approval. Do you support her plan? If not, how do you propose to address the affordability of higher education?
Well, thank you for asking that question because it's one I get from so many people today. I get it from young kids who tell me when they're in 8th grade that they don't plan to go to college because they think they can't afford it. And I talk to students in college like you too often who tell me that they're working 2, 3, 4, and even 5 jobs to pay for college education today, taking it a very long time for them to complete college. And then they have a student loan and they say to me, I'm not able to buy a car or a home or even kids because I'm paying back my student loan. So I am really excited that we are having a conversation in our country today about how we can make college more affordable for people. I want everyone who wants it the opportunity to go to college, and our economy needs people to get those skills so we can again help grow our country. So yes, I'm very interested in the proposal that that Hillary Clinton has put out there. I'm looking at how we can make that work. I think it is a great conversation to have. One thing that I think is important is as we put this together, and I hope we can get bipartisan support, we need to make sure that we have accountability so that we know students are going to school and getting good grades and that they are achieving what we want them to do, which is to get a degree that will allow them to get a job and contribute back. But I think it is a good conversation to have, and I'm very proud that the Democrats are putting that forward and look forward to working with Hillary and others, again, hopefully in a bipartisan way, to assure young people in this country today, don't give up when you're in 8th grade. Keep working when you're in college, and to families across our country that those student loan debts that you have will be lessened for the generations coming behind you.
Thank you. Mr. Vance?
You know, I've got a daughter who's a junior at Washington State University. Nothing would make me happier than free college. It'd be great, okay? And there are things we can do to reduce the burden of student debt, such as allowing students and parents to refinance their student loans. If you can do that with your car loan, your home loan, you ought to be able to do that. But one of the worst things I've seen, frankly, during this election season is politicians making promises that things can be just for free. We're $20 trillion debt. And what Hillary Clinton is proposing, what Senator Murray supports, is higher taxes on, quote, the rich to pay for making college free. We can do that, and I think we do need to ask the wealthiest Americans to contribute a bit more, for instance, to stabilize Social Security. But if we're going to raise taxes, we need to use it to pay down the debt, not for more spending. I would love it if the federal government could make everything free for everyone. But that's why we're $20 trillion in debt, because politicians keep promising things, and then they raise taxes to pay for those promises instead of using any new revenue to bring down the debt. The real answer to college affordability, frankly, is in state legislatures across the country. That they have reduced their support for higher education, and that's why tuition has been going up. Now, here in Washington State, we went the other direction, and they actually lowered college tuition. That's the way to go. The answer to this is in Olympia, not Washington, D.C. But on the broader point, that's why the federal government is $20 trillion in debt, is because politicians keep promising everybody free stuff, and we can't afford it anymore.
Okay, it's time to check our final Microsoft Pulse results. Your vote has decided the next 2 topics in our debate. As you can see, national politics wins with 31%, followed by, well, this is tight, healthcare is 28%. So our next question goes to Chris Vance, and that question is, you said months ago that you would not vote for Donald Trump for president. You have taken some grief from your fellow Republicans for this position. What do you say to those Republicans about how you fit today into the grand old party, given the rise of the Tea Party and the candidacy of Donald Trump?
Wow, Austin, we've been living that issue. This has been a very, very difficult year to be a Republican. Yeah. I haven't changed. I'm a Ronald Reagan, Slade Gorton, Dan Evans, Jennifer Dunn Republican. I believe in limited government. I believe in bringing down the debt. I believe in securing our national security. I believe in free enterprise. And I just couldn't support Mr. Trump for 2 reasons. Number one, he has demonstrated over and over again he's not really, I don't believe, fit to be president. And on the most basic issues that most Republicans have always supported, such as free trade, such as entitlement reform, he hasn't taken positions that traditionally Republicans have taken. So I've made it clear I don't support Mr. Trump. But you know what's interesting here is Senator Murray is a wholehearted supporter of Hillary Clinton. I've criticized my party over and over again. I've yet to hear Senator Murray ever criticize a Democrat for anything. And we need, I believe in this new era, we need people who are going to be independent voices not rubber stamps to their party leadership or their presidential nominee. I intend to go to the Senate as a free agent, somebody who can work with anybody to solve these problems. The last thing we need right now, in my view, is to elect Hillary Clinton and give her a blank check rubber stamp Congress. I think that is a major concern. It's a major difference between the two of us.
Senator Murray, you do support Hillary Clinton for president. In a CNN poll earlier this summer, 68% of respondents said honest and trustworthy are not characteristics that apply to Hillary Clinton. How do you explain to Washington voters, including those who supported Bernie Sanders, your unflinching support of Hillary Clinton?
Well, I'm very proud to support Hillary Clinton for president, and here's why. I've had the opportunity to work with her when she was in the White House in the 90s, when she worked extremely hard to make sure that we passed a program that made sure all of our young kids, the CHIP program, had health insurance. I know where her heart is. I watched and worked with her as she was Secretary of State and lifted up women around the globe. And I know that today she understands what's happening to middle-class families. She knows that too many people today face workplace issues where it makes it impossible for them to meet their economic potential. So she's talking about workplace policies like paid family leave and making sure that you get paid when you take sick leave and you don't lose out on your salary. Investing in education and college education like we talked about before. I know that she will work hard to lift up families around the country, and I'm proud to support her in that. And I'm also proud, as the grandmother of 2 young girls, to know that they will have a woman as the president of this country.
Here is our healthcare question. Diana from Bellevue asks, untreated hearing loss is associated with social isolation, depression, and greater risk of dementia, as well as reduced quality of life. Medicaid no longer covers hearing aids. Would you sponsor or co-sponsor legislation to restore it? We'll begin with you, Senator Murray.
So her question is that Medicaid does not cover hearing aids and she wants it covered. Well, I certainly understand her concern. Hearing is a critical part of learning. It's a critical part of participating in society. And I would love to talk to her about how we could do that. And as we rightly know, Medicaid is a health care program that is impacted by costs, and we have to adjust as we look at how we do that. But I do know this. Healthcare is a critical issue for so many people in our country, and we have to make sure that our federal policies, programs like Medicaid and Medicare, are there for people so that they have the support they need.
Mr.
Yes,
Vance.
absolutely. Medicaid needs to cover hearing aids. We need to raise the Medicaid reimbursement rate so more doctors will see Medicaid patients. It bothers me whenever I go into a doctor's office and there's a sign saying we don't take Medicaid patients. But this has to be part of a comprehensive solution. One of the worst things that happens in Congress right now is politicians respond to a need and they increase funding for a program and then they don't pay for it. Or they cut taxes and they don't pay for it and it drives up the debt. This is why I'm such a strong supporter of a Simpson-Bowles-style solution to our budget problems. This was the bipartisan commission appointed by President Obama to come up with a comprehensive solution to bring down our debt, reform our tax code, and stabilize programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It's going to involve some increases in revenue, which Republicans need to accept. It's going to involve some changes to our entitlement programs, which Democrats need to accept. All of these things have to be done together, not piecemeal, because when we do them bit by bit and don't pay for it, that's how you end up driving up the debt. And the debt, Austin, is not just a number. The debt is one of the main reasons why our economy is not growing. The Congressional Budget Office tells us that if our debt was on a downward path, then we'd have 5% more economic growth. More people would find more good jobs. People are hurting out there. The gap between rich and poor is widening because our economy is just not growing. We've had less than 3% growth the past 10 years for the first time in American history. And one of the main reasons why is because our debt is crushing the life out of our economy. So these things all have to be done together in one grand bargain. And right now, this generation of politicians in Washington, D.C., they've demonstrated they don't have the brains or the guts to get it done.
Thank you. So that brings to an end our Microsoft Pulse segment of our debate. Thank you to all who participated here in the auditorium and across the state of Washington. Now back to my colleague, Dave Ross.
We talk about foreign policy now, and this goes to Chris Vance first. Under what circumstances would you vote to authorize the use of force an American intervention in the ongoing Syrian civil war? And would you commit more ground forces than we have now?
Yeah, Dave, that's a great question. I'd love to have more than a minute 30 to answer this. Let me first say that any question involving military force or foreign policy, to me, goes back to the need to prevent war, to prevent a major war. I have a 24-year-old son. I understand the fears people have about getting the United States involved in major confrontations. The way to avoid that is to be consistent and firm and strong in our commitments. Syria is unbelievably complicated. You have the situation with ISIS, and you have the ongoing civil war in Syria between Sunni and Shia, and then you have the problem with the Kurds who are in conflict with the Turks. It's extremely complicated. We need to be focused first on job one, which is destroying ISIS on the ground. ISIS is the country that is an existential threat to many areas of the Middle East. They are launching terrorist attacks across the country. They're the ones killing Americans here in the United States. So I'm glad that we are putting pressure on Mosul. We need to go farther, and we need to take back Raqqa in Syria. We need to do whatever is necessary to destroy ISIS. If the Pentagon says that involves a few more ground troops, then that's what's necessary. But our first job has to be to destroy ISIS. Then I think we need to try and use diplomacy to try and settle the Syrian civil war. That's what's causing the refugee crisis, is the Syrian civil war. It might even involve getting the UN involved in further partitioning that part of the world. Maybe, as we did in the Balkans, we need to redraw some borders to separate Sunni and Shia. That's the the underlying conflict here is Sunni versus Shia, so it's going to require some major leadership. But we cannot, unfortunately, we cannot rule out the use of American ground forces to accomplish these missions.
Okay, so I heard a few more ground troops possibly. Senator Murray, same question to you. Under what circumstances would you vote to authorize force in the Syrian civil war, American force, and would you commit more ground forces than we have now?
Well, thank you. That's a really important question because one of the most important priorities we have is to make sure that we protect America and America's citizens. We do have to fight terrorism, but terrorism is not a country. Terrorism is across the globe, and we need to fight terrorists wherever they exist. The situation in Syria is extremely complex, and I know that the thing we should not be doing right now is putting American troops at risk in a civil war in Syria. We do need to fight terrorism, and we need to take terrorists out where they exist by using our airstrikes to take out their leaders and their financial resources. We need to make sure that we are working in global partnerships to go after terrorists wherever they are. And we're doing that now in Mosul, supplying support for the Iraqi troops that are taking out terrorists there. That's the right thing to do. But we also have to secure this country as well. We know that lone wolves are actually more likely here in the United States. We've seen that in San Bernardino. We've seen it in Paris. And that means that we have to make sure that we are interrupting their social media that they are using to recruit terrorists and fight that back on social media networks, which we are now doing. We also need to make sure that here at home we are protecting our own communities with our police, so if we have a terrorist attack here, we have the resources to go for it. And finally, I just have to say this. The very least we should be doing is saying that if you are on a terrorist watch list, that you cannot purchase a gun. And I'm deeply frustrated that the Senate refused to pass that bill not very long ago.
We now have another question from Melissa Santos of the Tacoma News Tribune.
Senator Murray, over the last decade, federal education policy shifted dramatically from No Child Left Behind, as you mentioned, to the Every Student Succeeds Act, granting more power to the states. You are one of the chief architects of the new law. What's the proper relationship between federal and state jurisdiction when it comes to setting standards and regulating our nation's schools? And how does the new law ensure that the quality of a student's education doesn't vary depending on the state in which they live?
That's a really important question because we live in a country that assures every child, no matter where they are or where they grow up, gets a good education. So the federal role is to make sure that there is a floor and all students are getting access to education. So our federal education policy has to assure that all students have an opportunity. It is actually, the federal education law is essentially a civil rights law. That's why it was first passed, because in too many states and too many places, students of color, students at lower income were not getting the same access. So we set the floor and we set the requirements. The No Child Left Behind Act was too restrictive, and students and teachers and parents were telling us that the over-restriction with all the testing was creating too much pressure in their classrooms. We have to make sure that we are accountable with our federal education dollars. When you get that diploma, it has to mean something. But we also have to assure that students who come here from other states or our students that go to other states enter school with the same kind of skills. So our new law keeps the accountability, but has that directed from states and local communities so they decide what they can do if they're not reaching those accountable rules, rather than having the federal government say, if you don't meet these requirements, here's a one-size-fits-all fix. We have changed it so that, that states themselves can develop what their response is if students aren't achieving what we want them to be doing.
Mr. Vance, you've called for an end to the federal government forcing schools to adopt certain standards and meet federal testing requirements or face loss of federal funding. But Education Week's annual report finds that southern and western states perform worse than schools in other parts of the country. Should geography really determine the fate of our children and the quality of their education?
Oh, of course not. And let me first say that I'm a huge supporter of public education. My kids went to public schools. I went to public schools. Tomorrow morning, my wife will be at an elementary school in Auburn where she is a special education paraeducator working with autistic kids and kids with Down syndrome. I've served on the House Education Committee. I'm one of the senior advisors to Superintendent of Public Instruction Randy Dorn. I've been involved in education policy for a very long time. And the federal government should help provide some funding to our local schools. And obviously, we should make sure that no one's civil rights are violated. But the federal government's gone far beyond that. We have allowed Congress to become the great school board on the Potomac. There's literally been cases where parents have gone into school board meetings saying, why do we have to use this textbook? And people say, well, because the federal government says so, or we'll lose our federal funding. Now, the new law that Senator Murray helped pass is better than the old law, but it still goes far too far, in my opinion, in terms of interfering in local school decisions. Schools should be governed by states and school districts, not by the federal government. We should not be looking over their shoulders, requiring them to do testing, requiring them to adopt certain standards. And under the new law, still, the federal government is reviewing the testing and reviewing the standards and can threaten to withhold federal funds. I don't understand why all these members of Congress, who many, like Senator Murray and I, started as state legislators, don't trust state legislators once they get back to Washington, D.C. So I think the federal government should help provide funding, but then get the heck out of the way. Our schools should be governed locally.
Now back to Dave Ross of Cairo Radio.
Thank you. Picking the next Supreme Court justice will be one of the most important jobs of the next president, unless the lame duck session surprises us all. The Senate has to confirm the president's pick. Mr. Vance, Richard from Auburn has this question. Do you support the Senate's delay in hearing the Merrick Garland nomination for the U.S. Supreme Court vacancy, and do you have a litmus test for the next Supreme Court justice? And if you do, what is it?
Yeah, I was very disappointed to hear the debate between the two presidential candidates the other night regarding Supreme Court justices. They talk about Supreme Court justices as if they're openly partisan. We have Republican judges and Democratic judges, liberal and conservative. It's not supposed to be that way. Our judges are supposed to be nonpartisan, and they're supposed to interpret the Constitution as they see it. I think the court has become far too partisan. So guess what? No, I don't have a litmus test. I will look at federal judicial nominations for the Supreme Court and other courts to whether or not they're qualified and whether they're good, solid people, not over any sort of ideological litmus test, because I think that's dangerous to our form of government. And I issued a statement the day that Justice Scalia passed away, calling on the Republican leadership to work with President Obama to jointly come up with a nominee who could be confirmed by the Senate. That didn't happen. And in typical Washington, D.C. fashion, those folks have spent the past several months issuing dueling press releases and yelling at each other while nothing gets done and the vacancy remains unfilled. And I think it's just wrong. And it's gone on too long. It's gone on for years. Both parties do it. As I said earlier, when President Bush nominated Samuel Alito to the Supreme Court, some Democrats, a few highly partisan Democrats, including Senator Murray, tried to filibuster that nomination. Other Democrats and Republicans said, no, we shouldn't be filibustering judges. So both parties have been blocking judicial nominations, and it's wrong. I will never support anything other than speedy confirmation hearings and an up or down vote on the Senate floor.
Senator Murray, same question. If the Republicans still control the Senate after the election, as a key Senate leader, what would you do to get a Clinton nomination confirmed? Do you have litmus test? Is there a deal breaker? And if you want to address the filibustering of Alito, go ahead.
I'm happy to do that. First of all, let me just say that our Supreme Court justices are critical to every person in our country and every business. They provide certainty. They make decisions about our women's right to choose, about our environmental laws, across the spectrum. So my vote for a Supreme Court nominee has to reflect the values and issues that my constituents care about. Every nominee that has come before me, I have evaluated them on their life experiences. Have they been out and about in our communities and seen what's going on? What is their life experience? What is their judicial philosophy? And certainly whether or not they reflect the values that me and my state consider to be important. That is exactly what I did with Justice Alito. When he came before us, unlike Merrick Garland, I brought him in my office. I talked to him. I listened to him. He had a hearing. I listened to every word that was said, and I made a judgment that he was not someone that I could support. He's now on the court. But I will tell you this, what really disturbs me is that Merrick Garland didn't get the same. He didn't get meetings with any Republican senators. He didn't get a hearing. He didn't get any kind of ability to make his case to me or any other senator, and I wanted the right for my state to have a vote in that. I hope that when this election is passed, that the Republicans will step back from holding up this nominee and we can move forward. We need a full court.
Thank you.
Now back to Melissa Santos with the News Tribune.
For Senator Murray, Alexandra from Spokane asks, Senator Murray, you sit on the Armed Services Committee. You and fellow Democrats have tried and tried again to pass budgets that increase funding for the Veterans Administration. How do you deal with your Republican counterparts, especially in the House, who continually vote down these budgets while claiming that they have veterans' backs? Senator.
I think you're talking about the Veterans Committee that I sit on. Not the Armed Services. The Veterans Committee covers veterans. And that's
Yes.
We got it. First of all, one of my highest priorities as the daughter of a World War II veteran and the first woman ever to ask to be on the Senate Veterans Committee and to be there to make sure that even though I voted against the war in Iraq, I made it very clear that if my country does send our men and women to fight for us, that I will be there to fight for them. And I stood up when no one else was and said, we are not providing the support we need for our men and women who are coming home from the war in Iraq and then in Afghanistan, to make sure that we were there for them with more than just a promise, that we were there to make sure that the services that they earned, they got, to do it in a timely manner, and we are not there yet. We still have a work to do. I hold every administration, Republican and Democrat, 2 feet to their fire. We're not there. We have to keep going. And I have gone further than that to make sure that our men and women who serve us, that they get the skills and the ability to get a job when they come home, so that we can make sure that the work that they've done is replicated. I call on every one of us as citizens and business owners and people to make sure that we are doing what we can do to help make sure that the men and women who served us get what they deserve. And that includes fighting in the Budget Committee year in and year out to make sure we have the resources to take care of those who have served us.
Thank you. I'll let Alexandra know which committee you sit on.
That's right.
Similar question for you, Mr. Vance, in response to Alexandra. Would you vote for increased funding for the Veterans Administration? Why or why not?
Oh, we need to spend whatever is necessary to maintain our commitments, to keep our commitments to America's veterans. That's, again, everything has to be done in the context, though, of an overall budget agreement that's going to be directed towards bringing down our debt, stabilizing Social Security and Medicare, reforming our taxes, and putting the debt on a downward path. But when you talk about the federal budget, again, The big giant cost drivers are the big entitlement programs, Social Security and Medicare and other health care programs. So there is money available for the other programs, I think, in the context of a big budget agreement, including veterans programs. And of course, we have to do that. My dad was a World War II veteran, fought in most of the major battles in Europe, and got a veterans disability check for the rest of his life. As soon as I announced for the U.S. Senate, my phone started ringing and guys started getting emails from veterans passionate about this issue. It's an enormous issue here in Washington State where we have so many military bases and so many retired veterans. And what I hear consistently is a lot of veterans, maybe most of them, like the service they get from the VA once they get in the system. The problem is the queue in getting in the system. Literally hundreds of thousands of veterans have died waiting to get service from the VA. So Congress needs to hold whichever administration it is next year more accountable to better fix the administration of the VA. And then I think we need to give more veterans more options to seek services outside the traditional VA system if that's what they want to do.
Are you saying that you wouldn't support more funding without additional reforms at the VA?
No, I didn't say that at all. I just think what I'm saying is, again, I get very nervous about politicians promising, I'm going to increase funding for this, and I'm going to increase funding for that, and then not paying for it, and then not being part of a comprehensive budget agreement. That's what we have to do.
Okay. Candidates, we have just a little bit of time left, so I'm going to give you 1 minute each for this question, but I think you can handle it in a minute. For both of you, what is the first website that you look at or open in the morning when you get up, and what is the last one you look at before you go to bed at night? We'll start with you, Chris Vance. You still have a minute.
Oh, absolutely. The 3 websites you guys work for, absolutely. In addition to the local news sites, I look at all the websites that aggregate the news. I love realclearpolitics.com and the others that take all the various news stories together into one site where you can pick and choose what you need to read. The Internet is a wonderful tool for finding the news online. So that's pretty much where I go.
Senator Murray.
Well, I just have to be honest. I would love to tell you the very first thing I look at is all of your websites, but I will be honest. I look to see because I want to find out how my grandkids are doing and how my family's doing, so I look at what they're up to on Facebook and other sites, but I do look at many of our state's newspapers across the state and our media to find out what's going on so that I can keep current and continue to be a strong voice for whatever the issues are that people are facing in our state.
I knew you could both do that in under a minute. Thank you. That does bring us to the end of our formal questions. It is now your opportunity to provide closing statements. Senator Murray, we will begin with you.
Well, thank you very much to our moderators. You did a good job. Thank you to our audience. And Chris, thank you again. I think we've had a thoughtful discussion. I think Chris and I both agree that our country and our economy is not working as well as we would like it to. I think that we disagree on our approaches and our policies to get us there. Here's what I want you to know. I'm watching my grandchildren grow up in this world, and I want for them what you want for yours, that they get a good education, that they go to college if they want to, that they have health care and mental health care, that they dream their big dreams and be what they want to be. I want them to know that their country is there for them, as it was for me when I was growing up and my dad got sick and lost his job. My country was there to make sure he got his veterans pay and veteran services. They gave my mom the ability to go to school and get the skills she needed to go back to work and get a job and help out all 7 kids in our family. And my country was there to invest in me to make sure that I had grants and student loans to get an education and be here tonight in front of all of you as your United States Senator. I want my grandchildren to know that in this country we respect our neighbors and all Americans and treat them with dignity. And I want them to know it is not okay to demean anyone for what they look like or what they believe in our classrooms or in our workplaces. I ask for your vote so I can continue to fight for you and those you love, to help them realize the American dream, that no matter where you are or where you come from, the color of your skin, how much money you have, that your country will be there for you. That's the promise I will work for every day as your United States Senator. Thank you.
And Mr. Vance, your closing.
Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Microsoft. Thank you, Senator Murray. I think you and I have shown how debate should be conducted, I think, during this campaign. And most importantly, thank you to the Washington State Debate Coalition, to Seattle City Club, Diane Douglas. You guys are fantastic. None of this would have happened without you, and we need more of it. I hope the Debate Coalition grows and expands because our democracy needs more of this. Folks, we are coming to the end of one of the most disappointing and divisive elections in recent history. I am very concerned that after all of this, the gridlock and dysfunction is just going to continue in Washington, D.C. But I'm equally concerned about giving Hillary Clinton a blank check rubber stamp Congress. I think we need independent voices in Washington, D.C. We can fix America's problems, but we cannot continue to accept politics as usual, excuses, and blind partisanship. And electing the same people year after year, decade after decade, will not change anything. If you want change, you've got to vote for change. I'll be a different kind of senator. I'll work hard every day to change the culture in Washington, D.C., to bring Republicans and Democrats together to solve our biggest problems. I'll be an independent voice and never anyone's rubber stamp. And I would be honored to have your vote. Thank you, and good evening.
And thank you to our candidates. If you have not yet already received your ballot in the mail, you should expect to get it in the mail by this Tuesday, October 25th. New Washington State voters do have until October 31st, that's Halloween, to register in person. And of course, don't forget to vote by November 8th. Remember, ballots must be postmarked or dropped in an approved box by Election Day. Drop boxes close promptly at 8 p.m. on Election Day. For more information, you can visit the sos.wa.gov website. Good night, and have a good, and please vote. Our debate Coalition and its founder, Seattle City Club. Thank you again to our debate host and lead sponsor, Microsoft. Lead sponsor, AARP Washington State. Supporting sponsors, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Henry M. Jackson Foundation. Debate sponsor, PEMCO Insurance. And individual donors to Seattle City Club's Empowered Voters Campaign. The executive producer for the Washington State Debate Coalition is Bill Kazarba. Production services provided by David and John Birch of Spirit Born Productions. I'm Austin Jenkins with the Northwest News Network. Thank you for watching, and good night.